All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be covering units. Quiet down, grab a seat somewhere. We're going to be covering units 7 and 8. Now, for those of you that'll be listening to this at home, you might notice that the sound quality is much less my voice in a blender, because I just bought a new microphone, and so this microphone here actually is very good, and so it won't. Yeah, we tested it out earlier. It won't sound like I'm yelling at you through a blender. It'll sound like I'm in front of you. Now, the packet I gave out to you guys earlier today, let me describe it real quick in case you guys choose to use it today during class. Today's packet on page 1, that's going to be about immigration. And so this front page here is about immigration. If you do need a copy of the packet because you were absent, I'm going to put it right here on top of the projector. But the first page here is about immigration. This is 1840s and 1850s because likely you'll have to compare. The second page here is about the 1920s culture, so impact of technology, race relations, immigration, that kind of thing. On the other side, this is just progressive era reforms. The different types of reforms will be there. On the following page is the progressive presidents and what they did, and the goals and strategies of African Americans. On the other side is the roles and significance of World War I. And lastly, on the back sides, you have foreign policies and why we went to World War I. So these are just different packets. Familiarize yourself with them so that if you feel like you want to fill in this packet versus your actual notebooks, you're welcome to do so. As a reminder for those of you, we have only so many days left until the AP test. So if you have yet to start studying, you still have a good 2.5 weeks, but you need to start studying now. And in all honesty, folks, if you haven't started studying yet, you need to get a review book and start studying from that. I mean, you don't have very much time to start going over all your notes again. You need to grab a review book and you need to start studying. Based on your numbers currently, I was just going over to see who I think would pass as of today. And a little more than half is good, but ideally it should be like 90% of you. But because 90% of you have not shown that you have the ability to study so far, I'm a bit concerned. So I'm giving myself a conservative estimate, so I won't say everyone's gonna pass, and on the day of I have like 2 people pass. So I'm trying to be conservative here, but you guys need to wow me in the AP group. Today we're covering Unit 7. Let's start off with American imperialism, shall we? Everyone, quiet down, come on in, find a seat somewhere. There's clearly more people than we've had in the past, so find a seat if you can. Here we go, folks. Unit 7 and American imperialism. So quiet down. Again, before we began expanding in America, America was focused mainly on isolationism within the U.S. Now, we talked about this chart already. We talked about what fell under isolationism, collective security, internationalism, and imperialism. You should just roughly be aware what all of these terms mean. Are there any questions about these terms? About isolationism, collective security, internationalism, or imperialism? Edgar.
Farewell
address? The farewell address, where would that fall under? Isolationism or loner, because it suggested that we should stay away from entangling alliances. Any other questions? What about Monroe Doctrine? Where would Monroe Doctrine fall under? A little bit of team player and a little bit of isolationism, right? Because we want to stay away from Latin America, we want to stay away from Europe, but at the same time we want to be collective security because we want to make sure that Europe does not colonize Latin America. Mexican-American War, where does that put us? That would make us a little bit of an imperialist country, right? We're trying to take over. Spanish-American War, where would that put us? Imperialism. And what about World War I? Maybe world policemen, internationalism, maybe a little bit of collective security because we work with other countries. But earlier in that war, folks, we were isolationists, right? Because we refused to go to war. So some things to keep in mind. Well, things that happened, folks, we bought Alaska, and who can raise their hand and told me who bought Alaska? Who was raising their hand back there? Brenda, who bought Alaska? William Seward. So William Seward bought Alaska, and it was known as Seward's Folly. Who could raise their hand and tell me why it was known as Seward's Folly? Why did we call this Seward's Icebox or Seward's Folly? Karina. They said it was a waste of money because all it was a big chunk of ice when it turned out later on, what did we find in Alaska? Oil, gold, landscapes, all that stuff. Well, let's talk about this new cause of imperialism. Again, quiet down, folks. Again, the first major reason why we're going to begin expanding our territory and control is because of economic interest. Primarily, America is in pursuit of what in the world? Raw materials. But we also want to colonize and imperialize, because if we take over a territory, those people can serve as what two things for us? Consumers and labor. They can make stuff for us, but we can also sell stuff to them. So the economic interest, folks, again, a Mick world or a Coca-Cola world today is what we have, again, pursuing economic interests. Secondly, international Darwinism. We're also expanding because we feel that what? We're better than them. We can. Survival of the fittest. And the only reason we're taking you over is because we're stronger than you. If we couldn't take over you, it's because you were strong. But guess what? You're weak. Therefore, we have the right to take over you. It's just nature. And so you have the white man's burden, though it's our responsibility now that we're stronger than you to take over. So you should be familiar with this idea of, again, international Darwinism. And then there's global competition. What is this all about? Yeah, Anthony? Right, then who? Right, then the other Europeans, right? And so there's this global competition for economic resources, so we're competing with these other countries to try to establish these perfect empires. Again, have they beat us to it already? And so we're in a race to compete with them, so we should be aware of this global competition occurring at this time. Then religious interest. There's also the idea that we have to expand to be able to do what? Yeah, Christianize, civilize, evangelize. I mean, we got to spread the word of the Lord. These people just don't know. They don't know. We got to spread the word. Now, what book was written to discuss the importance of spreading religion around the world? Melanie. Right, Our Country, Its Possible Future and Present Crisis by Hosea Strong. So again, when we think of Hosea Strong, does that name kind of seem religious-y? Yeah. Like, how many Hoseas do you know? They're like, just like complete atheists. So Hosea is the guy that's about religious interest. Does that make sense to everyone? That's one really good way to remember that he's the guy that wrote about how Hosea wanted a strong religious, emphasis. And then, of course, there's this idea of expanding our Navy. And who wrote that book? Alfred T. Mahan. So in expanding our Navy, the idea was we have to expand so that our Navy has some place to refuel, to stop, to get supplies. Because according to the influence of sea power upon history, it's argued that the most powerful countries in the world were powerful because of what? Their navies, because they had powerful navies. And so we want to establish a great white fleet to expand our prowess. And then, of course, you have yellow journalism. And how is yellow journalism going to promote imperialism? Yeah, it's going to make life exciting and sensationalized, and we're going to want to go and see all these new exotic locations, and maybe we'll start wars while we're at it. But yellow journalism creates this desire for expansion, this popular press. So, any questions there so far? None? Okay. Of these, what do you think was most likely to cause war, or likely to cause imperialism? A lot of them are pretty good reasons. International, economic, they're all pretty good reasons. Anyway, McKinley becomes president. He takes over Hawaii. Any questions about Hawaii? Queen Liliuokalani, pronounced Hawaii, not Hawaii. Hawaii. Or really more correctly, Hawaii. But we're good. Why Hawaii? Right. Center of the Pacific Ocean allows us to be able to trade, allows us to be able to stop our navy. It's the halfway point, and it's a jumping off point to start colonizing what next? Asia, Guam, the Midway Islands, Marshall Islands. So again, it's a halfway point to colonize the rest of the world. Spanish-American Wars begins. What causes it? Jingoism. What's jingoism, folks? Extreme nationalism. We should take over because we're America and we're awesome. We deserve it. So is that going to might cause some problems for other countries? Hey, I'm sorry, Spain owns Cuba. What? Spain? America should own Cuba because we're awesome. Of course, the yellow press, are they also going to start a war? Yes. And why might the yellow press start a war? They want to sell newspapers, right? So William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, are they going to spread some lies and stories about what's happening in Cuba? About the Cuban Revolution? Sure. Remember, how long are we going to let them be raped and killed? How long are terrible things going to happen? How long are we going to keep reading this sentence? How long? So how long is really... The Delome letter. The Delome letter also kind of convinced us to go to war because this is when the ambassador criticized who? McKinley, the president. And they said, how dare you? You know, we can criticize our own president, but do we want foreigners to criticize our president? No, that's my president. I can say he's horrible, but you can't. That's a privilege that I have as an American. Then the USS Maine sank. What happened here? Well, what do we think happened? The Spanish blew it up, and so therefore, do we now have a reason to go to war? Yes. And are we excited about this? Because now we can go to war and take over Cuba. And so we blame the Spanish. The Spanish is like, no, it wasn't us. And we're like, prove it wasn't you. And they're like, ha-ha. The evidence is on our side because you have no evidence that it wasn't you. So McKinley declares war, saying, you know, we didn't really want to go to war, but what choice did we have? They blew up the Maine, and we go to war. Now, some people said, I don't know about this. This seems kind of shady. Maybe you're just trying to go to war to take over Cuba. And they're like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to protect the Cubans from the Spanish. You know, I mean, clearly people are going to die, but that's not what we're trying to do here. And so they said, prove it. And we're like, fine. And so we passed the Teller Amendment as part of the war declaration. And who can tell me what the Teller Amendment said? Who can raise their hand and tell me what the Teller Amendment's all about? Let's go with Samantha.
The U.S. would not annex Cuba, and they would promote self-determination.
Exactly. We said, hey, we're not going to war to take over Cuba because we promised not to take it over with the Teller Amendment. Okay, so we say that. We promised not to take over Cuba with the Teller Amendment. Here's the Spanish-American War. It begins. Things happen. Ships sinking, stuff, wars, Rough Riders, Roosevelt, DMX. Then, once the war is over, we say, hey, Cuba's allowed to be independent because did we promise not to take it over? Yes. We did, right? We said we wouldn't take it over, but do we still want to control it? Yes. Sure we do. So we go to Cuba and we say, hey, Cuba, you know how we helped you gain independence? We will not remove our military until you sign the Platt Amendment. Now, did Cuba have any choice here? No. So Cuba was forced to sign the Platt Amendment. So who could raise their hand and tell me what the Platt Amendment said? What's the Platt Amendment telling us? Carla. Right, so pretty much the U.S. can control Cuban affairs, right? The U.S. can intervene whenever they feel necessary. The U.S. can go ahead and prevent Cuba from signing treaties. The U.S. pretty much controls Cuba. Do we own Cuba? No, but we control it. And so this is pretty much what happens here. Also, we gain access to what territory? Guantanamo Bay. So everyone good with Teller Amendment and Platt Amendment? Yep. What's the name of that other document that was about how we tried to spread slavery to Cuba by almost starting a war with Spain by offering them $1? Ostend Manifesto. So go ahead and just write that down in your notes there. Ostend Manifesto. I know that's the last unit, but it's Cuba, and you should just know all the things Cuba related. Ostend Manifesto. So if you guys don't already have Ostend Manifesto, that's when they're going to start a fake war with Cuba, but then we uncovered it before it happened. So Ostend Manifesto. The goal was to spread slavery, and it failed because we found out about it beforehand. Questions so far? The Franklin Pierce in the South were going to try to cause a fake war with Spain in order to take over Cuba, and so that's what happened. It never happened. Anyway, so we have our splendid little war, right? Because it's a very short war, only 3 months with Spain. Uncle Sam's latest, greatest, shortest war. And that's over with. But who's not happy with the end of this war? Why are the Philippines unhappy? Yeah, the Philippines were fighting this war believing that they were going to gain what? Independence. Instead, what did we do? We bought the Philippines, right? We didn't give them independence. Instead, we bought the Philippines. And so who leads the revolution against America? Emilio Aguinaldo, a man you should know. Emilio Aguinaldo leads the rebellion against the Americans. Ultimately, they lose. The anti-imperialists are not too happy with what's going on in the Philippines. But that's over and done with. And again, here's the idea. The Spanish are selling a slave to Uncle Sam. And again, Colombia is not too happy about it. So would people argue that maybe the end of the Spanish-American War was not very just or moral? Yeah, definitely, right? Of course, we do have the Foraker Act, and who can tell me what the Foraker Act said? Let's go with Alejandro.
Denied the Puerto Ricans citizenship.
It denied the Puerto Ricans citizenship, saying, hey, you can be in America, but you don't get citizenship. And that's all part of the insular cases, because what did the insular cases ultimately rule? Maria. The Constitution does not follow the flag. So just because we take over your country, does that mean that you get U.S. citizenship and U.S. civil rights? No, it does not. You do not get the same rights that we get. Any questions about the insular cases? The Constitution does not follow the flag. That's what that is. The Constitution does not follow the flag. So we take it over, but those people that now have the American flag waving over their houses, they don't get constitutional rights immediately. That depends on Congress. Any other questions about the insular cases? We're just throwing stuff away outside, so. So, significance of the Spanish-American War. You have a lot of nationalism. America emerges as a world power. We are seen as a first-class power with a strong navy. All that stuff. Questions there? No? Good? Awesome. Election 1900 then. McKinley opens up China. Up until this point, China was divided up by what? Into what? Spheres of influence. You know, Russia owned this, Japan owned this, England owned this. And this was a problem because does America want spheres of influence here? No, because can America gain access to China like this? No, he says, no, friends, we should not divide it up and refuse to share. We should share. And so what ends up happening is we introduce what becomes known as the open door notes or the open door policy that tries to get rid of what? Spheres of influence, and instead suggests open door or creating what in China? Equal access. So we create equal access to all of China, thus open door. Any questions about open door policy? So all these foreigners start entering China, and are the Chinese happy about that? So ultimately that results in the Boxer Rebellion, which was a rebellion to drive out all the foreigners. Does it succeed? Unfortunately not. Magic isn't real. So the Americans fight back, and eventually, by the end, has America established its empire? Yes, it has. William McKinley is assassinated by Leo Kazalgazov. Sir.
We go to China for the equal access
Equal trade. Not to spread democracy. No, they're not trying to spread democracy. They're trying to gain equal access. Yeah, on the CST, the answer was equal access. Anyway, so this is one of the charts you guys have in your notes. I think something along this is something like before the Spanish-American War, isolationism, then the Spanish-American War, and all the stuff after the Spanish-American War. So we talk about then Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy is what? Big stick diplomacy. America as the world police. The idea is speak softly and carry a big stick. And what is the big stick in this sense? The Great White Fleet or the Navy. So we're going to exercise this big stick, and we want to build a canal in Panama, right here. Unfortunately, Panama's owned by who? Colombia. So we asked Colombia, hey, Colombia, can we build a canal? They said, no. We said, oh, okay. You won't let us build a canal? Hey, Panamanians, do you want independence from Colombia? They're like, sure we do. So we said, fine. We're going to help you gain independence, and then we're allowed to build the canal. They're like, sure. So we tell Colombia, hey, Colombia, Panama's going to build a canal, okay? And Colombia said, okay, because they had no choice. The military was in their backyard. You should know the 3 prevailing treaties that lead up to the Panama Canal, though. The Clayton-Bulwer Treaty said that who must build a canal with America? The British. And then in 1901, the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty said we can build it by ourselves. And in 1903, we can build a canal where? In Panama. So this is a treaty with Panama saying, yeah, go ahead and build a treaty or build a canal in Panama. Questions about the Panama Canal? That one? This? Yeah, that one. Cool. Anyway, what? Okay. And then, of course, Panama Canal building. And then there's the Roosevelt Corollary. What was the basic idea of the Roosevelt Corollary? Who can raise their hand and tell me what the Roosevelt Corollary was all about? Let's go with Brenda. Yeah, the U.S. may intervene in Latin America whenever necessary. So the U.S. may intervene in Latin America. The basic idea was, in one instance, England was going to invade or attack Venezuela because Venezuela refused to pay back their debts. Now, technically, does England have the authority to do that because Venezuela owes them money? Sure. But America said, England, wait. Instead of you coming to Latin America, why don't I collect the money for you? And so all of a sudden, America is going to, again, govern and intervene in Latin America and serve as a debt collector. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, do the Latin Americans like this about America? Not so much. Then America's going to get involved with Japan. They're going to help Japan end the war with Russia in the Russo-Japanese War, and they're going to make them sign the Treaty of Portsmouth. As a result, TR will win the Nobel Peace Prize for ending a war with the threat of war. Then they're going to send the Great White Fleet to Japan to say, hey, knock it off. Then we have the Gentleman's Agreement. Who can tell me what the Gentleman's Agreement's all about? Who's the Gentleman's Agreement? Corina.
Roosevelt promised to protect Japanese Americans in California if Japan stopped Japanese immigration.
Yeah, so pretty much if you remember, the Japanese and a lot of white Americans were fighting in the San Francisco school district. We were mistreating Japanese Americans. So Japan said, hey, you have to stop mistreating Japanese Americans. TR said, okay, fine. We'll protect them if you stop Japanese immigration. Everyone good on Gentleman's Agreement?
Yes.
Cool. Then you have the Root-Takahira Agreement, which is pretty much said we're going to recognize each other's empires. Good there. Primarily what we meant was, Japan, please don't try to take over what country that we now own in the Asia? The Philippines. Please don't take over Asia. That's mine. Cool. Lodge Corollary also aimed at the Japanese. It said what? Yeah, the Japanese may not own or colonize land in the Western Hemisphere. Because the Monroe Doctrine said who couldn't own land? The Europeans. So the Japanese are like, aha, loophole. So we fixed that loophole with the Lodge Corollary. Any questions there? So could you argue that maybe this is a bad neighbor policy for Latin America? Yeah, because definitely TR sticking his nose in other people's business when they shouldn't be. Mexico really wanted to sell land to Japan, but we said no. So you kind of have that going on. And America is kind of just using the world as its plaything, and I'm not too happy about that. So then we have Taft, who wins the next election. And when Taft becomes president, his basic idea is dollar diplomacy. And the basic idea is rather than taking over other countries by force, how are we going to take over countries? Through investment. Hey, if you want us to keep, if you want to keep us happy and creating jobs in your country, do you have to do what we say? That's the basic idea. So controlling through economic investment. Unfortunately, because we had so much money invested in Latin America and those countries became so unstable, did we have to use the military? Yes, we did. And did he intervene more than TR? Yes, he did. So not so good. So there's Taft trying to be TR, and that's just not so good. I mean, you can't be TR, Taft. You just can't do that. Stick to dollar diplomacy. Then, of course, the election of 1912, you have these three guys running against each other. Woodrow Wilson wins. And he says, all that attacking is not good. All of this focusing on investment is not good. We should be a country of morality, of moral diplomacy. And what should we be promoting as a country? Human rights, democracy, self-determination, all those good things, right? He says we should promote that instead. So, Jones Act, what happened here? Who can raise their hand and tell me what happened with the Jones Act? Melanie. It gave Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship. And then there's the Jones Law. Who can tell me what the Jones Law said? Samantha.
They said they would give the Philippines citizenship and they would give them independence eventually.
Yeah, we'll eventually give the Philippines independence. I love the word eventually in U.S. history. It is such a heavy-handed word. Eventually. Because in the context of eventually, it can be like 50 years. I mean, eventually to us is like tomorrow. But in U.S. history, eventually means like 30 years from now. Panama Canal Tolls Act. What did this do? Right? It said that America had to pay tolls as well. Right? It was promoting capitalism. America must also pay tolls at the canal. But, despite all these efforts to be good and nice and equal, did we intervene? We sure did. We intervened in Mexico, which is not so good. We chased down Pancho Villa. In fact, we took over the port city of Veracruz in an effort to stop them from nationalizing all this stuff. And so progress was not really being made because of America. And then we intervened in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So again, how are we doing as a country? Not so good. And here's Wilson intervening. How does that look? Not so good. And so did Wilson intervene more than TR? Did he intervene more than Taft? Yeah, he intervened the most, more than any other. So when we talk, Wilson intervened more than Taft and TR. So, I mean, is he really the bad neighbor policy guy? Yeah. Well, he's moral diplomacy, but he's also bad neighbor. So, remember, guys, when we're talking about who was most successful at their foreign policy? TR, Taft, or Wilson? TR, because he did exactly what he said. Big stick diplomacy. Who was least successful? Wilson, because he said he wasn't going to intervene, and then did he intervene? And then Taft is right in the middle because he kind of did the economic thing, but he also failed, but no one cares. So, yeah. Any questions about imperialism? Everyone good with imperialism? Cool, let's move on to progressivism. I'm really tired, guys. I'm just like really tired. I am not able to catch up on sleep this last month. Like this entire month, I'm just not able to catch up on sleep. If it's not one thing, it's the other. We'll see. Anyway, progressive era. Again, folks, these two units, you are likely going to get an AP question. So make sure you guys are paying attention. And don't worry, I'm going to hammer this stuff again the last week before the AP test. I'm going to constantly reference this material. But the progressive era, as you guys know, is a period of social reform. Everyone knows that part, right? Okay. This is going to be inspired by the antebellum reforms. Everyone knows that one, right? All the antebellum reforms, education, Dorothea Dix, votes for women, all that stuff. There are going to be a lot of new problems caused during the 20th century, caused during the Gilded Age. Problems of urbanization, right? Living in the slums, problems of industrialization like trusts and corporations. And we're going to talk about dumbbell tenements and ghettos. We'll talk about political corruption by Boss Tweed, environmental destruction, treatment of blacks, population explosion, temperance, women's rights. These are all factors we're going to try to fix during this time period. So why did the progressives exist? Oh, who were the progressives, by the way? Typically these middle-class women, and they were optimistic. They felt that it was the people's responsibility to fix government, especially because the government was practicing what at the time? Laissez-faire. They were doing nothing. So they said, fine, if the government will do nothing, we will do something, and then we will convince the government to do something about it. And so mostly these were middle-class women participating in the progressive era, greatly inspired by who during the Gilded Age? What women kind of led up to the progressive era? Settlement house workers, Jane Addams, Florence Kelley. Well, you have muckrakers that will also work to kind of promote this progressive era. First, you have the muckrakers. The muckrakers were digging up dirt. They typically wrote for magazines and sensationalized. Again, a muckraker, someone who dug up dirt. Ida Tarbell dug up dirt at Standard Oil, saying they were corrupt and practiced rule or ruin. Questions there? Lincoln Steffens wrote about corruption in the cities. Questions there? I'm going over this quickly. Theodore Dreiser. You guys know Theodore Dreiser. He wrote about the problems of industrialization. Too much emphasis on money and materialism. And of course, Frank Norris. Frank Norris promoted, again, the problems of monopolies, specifically Standard Oil. The problems of trusts, Frank Norris. John Spargo wrote about the problems of what? Child labor, the bitter cry of children. So, what did the muckrakers do, folks? I mean, ultimately, why were they significant?
They exposed social inequality.
Right, they exposed social inequalities. They talked about serious problems. They talked about corruption. Yeah, they brought the problems to the public, right? They informed the public, those kinds of things. So you should be familiar with the significance of the muckrakers. Again, the middle-class women were also key. Jane Addams and Hull House. They also promote things like women Christian temperance unions to try to end alcohol. Anti-Saloon League tried to fight alcohol. So the Volstead Act is passed, and eventually prohibition will be passed with the 18th Amendment. So is that successful? Yeah. Yes, temperance is finally successful. You should note that. Shh. Women's rights, are they going to be successful? Eventually, right? Right after World War I. So they'll get there. You have Carrie Chapman Catt creating NASA, trying to fight for women's right to vote. What is the first state to give women the right to vote? Wyoming. Alice Paul will create an organization to try to fight for women's right to vote. National Women's Party. They are going to try to convince Wilson to give them the right to vote, saying, why are we fighting for democracy in Germany when women don't have democracy in America? Which is a very good question. Alice Paul is arrested, as we know, fighting for women's suffrage. Women will play a key role during World War I as nurses, factory workers, whatever else, and will that ultimately earn them the right to vote? Yes, so being familiar with the role of women during World War I. Now, after the war, and once women had the right to vote, did women start voting in droves and big numbers? Unfortunately not, so still that going on. And then, of course, Bad Romance, Lady Gaga. Then state reforms. Initiative, referendum, and recall. Do you guys know what these are? Initiative is what? Citizens can create a bill. Referendum. The people can vote on a bill. Recall. We can vote people out of power. Is this giving citizens a lot more power in government? Most definitely. And is this a federal reform or state reform? State reform, guys. This does not apply to Congress. This applies in California, in Wisconsin, in New York. Does that make sense, folks? These are state reforms, not federal reforms. Federal reforms applies to the entire government. Then the direct election of senators. What amendment is that? 17th Amendment. Very good. We have the progressive governors, Fighting Bob, Hiram Johnson, and Charles Evan Hughes. They will promote these progressive reforms. Good? You should just know their names. Labor reforms were big at this time, and of course Florence Kelley is going to try to end what? Child labor and sweatshops. Good. Mueller v. Oregon is going to say what? Women should only work a 10-hour workday, and it was intended to help them, right? Like, women, guys, women need a 10-hour workday. I'm like, oh, thank you. But here, why? It's because women are weak. And they're like, oh, never mind. That was not as good as I thought it was going to be. And then in Lochner v. New York, what did this rule? You can't limit women to a 10-hour workday. So that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. Anyone. You can't limit anyone to a 10-hour workday. So the reason why this is bad is that, yes, you can't limit women to a 10-hour workday anymore, but now people can force you to work as long as you want, right? Which is not so good. Keating-Owens Act, what did this do? It tried to ban child labor by trying to ban what? Transportation of child labor goods. But this bill is killed by what? Hammer v. Dagenhart, the coolest Supreme Court case. It just sounds cool. Then you had the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which made us realize that what is not working well? Yeah, like safety protocols and the locking of doors in factories. Not so bueno. Were there successes in labor reforms? Some. Some labor reforms, definitely. Some failures, but are we getting better? Definitely. Black rights, you guys should just know Webb Du Bois and Booker T. Any questions about these two? Again, think Booker T is like the wrestler, and he always does that hand in the air because he only wants money. It goes like this. And he does that. So Booker T wants money. Okay, think of that letter T as like a pedestal for money. And think Webb Du Bois, like, oh, Webb Du Bois, such a fancy name. You must have gone to college. That might help. So Webb Du Bois has a fancy name, a name that only probably a man that went to college would have. Booker T. Washington, the guy, he became a wrestler, and all he wants is money. Does that help? Help? A good way to help remember them? Okay. The Webb Du Bois and the fancy name, I just figured that one out right now. That's a new one. That's the new one we'll add to the book. Exactly. Of course I'm going to go to college. Didn't you know my name was Webb Du Bois? I mean, who else? Why wouldn't I go to college? Look at my name. Anyway, but everyone knows kind of what they stood for? Yep, okay, moving on. Don't worry about the Supreme Court cases. Ida B. Wells, also fighting for black rights. She was a muckraker, again. And she also tried to fight lynching in the South. Yes, ma'am. Ida B. Wells. versus Ida Tarbell, who was not. Two different people. Yeah, think Ida Tarbell and like Tar Oil, Standard Oil. Ida B. Wells is African American who tried to fight against the lynching. She wants to make people feel well. Don't confuse it with Elizabeth Blackwell. Yes.
So like, it's like she's like the whole like a photographer.
Yeah, she was a muckraker photographer who tried to end
She wasn't like pink. She was black.
because she was hiding. And other people would take photos for her. I mean, she was uncovering other things, but I mean, people would give her photos and that would happen. In any case, folks, Ida B. Wells, think the B stands for black, I guess, if that helps. If you guys can't remember that she's African American, though, I mean, that's just one way to remember. I mean, I'm not trying to be racist. I'm just trying to help you guys remember these facts. Of course, Marcus Garvey was United Negro Improvement Association. What did he feel like we should do? We should move back to Africa. Very different from sending them back to Africa, right? So this is the other Back to Africa movement saying, hey, we should move back to Africa because it's where we belong. Make sense? The American Colonization Society said we should send slaves back to Africa. This is they're free already, and they should go back to Africa because they'll be better off there because there won't be racism. Yes, ACS was promoted by whites, and this was promoted by blacks. It's about black pride. Role of blacks during World War I, is that going to help them out a bit? Yes. Definitely, they'll fight for black rights as they fight in World War I. We're wondering, hey, if we're fighting in the war, we should have some more rights as well. Were there successes for black rights?
Very little.
Very little, because unfortunately, despite progress, what's going to continue standing in their way? Jim Crow. Very good. Progressive presidents then. Teddy Roosevelt is the first progressive president. Here he is with his many hats and timeline. He preached from the bully pulpit and tried to, again, force people to do what he wanted. He believed in the 3 C's: conservation, corporate regulation, and consumer protection. Everyone ready? Conservation is about, again, trying to save the environment. Everyone knows that one, right? Easy. Was environment really important to him? Yes. In fact, he refused to shoot a teddy bear. Then you have corporate regulation. What did he want to do? Bust trusts. And what was he going to use to bust them? The Sherman Antitrust Act. But ultimately, and again, he busted the Northern Securities Company. Everyone, any questions there? Was that a big deal, by the way? Yes, because that was a big trust, sir.
At first, the Sherman Antitrust Act was used for labor unions, and then he used it for...
Yeah, he said, no, we're going to use it for real. We're going to use it the right way. So when TR became president, he says, we've been using the Sherman Antitrust Act incorrectly. We've been applying it to labor unions instead of where we should have applied it, which is trusts. So he starts busting trusts. He becomes a trust buster. And so he does things like the Elkins Act. And who can tell me what the Elkins Act did? And made railroad rebates illegal. Then he passed the Hepburn Act. Who can raise their hand and tell me what that did? Hepburn Act. Brenda. Right, it allowed the ICC to regulate railroads more strongly. But then TR had this enlightening moment. He said, wait a minute. Maybe we shouldn't bust all trusts. Because maybe there are 2 kinds of trusts. What are those 2 kinds of trusts? Good trusts and bad trusts. Bad trusts, what should we do? Bad trusts, we should bust them. But for good trusts, what should we do? Regulate them. Keep them on a leash and regulate them. Because might some trusts be good for the economy? Sure. So he says, let's regulate the good trusts. And so despite all of this, he earns a nickname of Trust Buster because he's standing against the Titans. Then there's a square deal. And in the square deal, he said he wanted to give a fair deal to all of labor, the people, whatever else. And specifically, the square deal was applied during what event? The coal mine strike, specifically the anthracite coal mine strike. But you should know, that the square deal was used during the anthracite coal mine strike. And that coal mine strike is significant because TR threatened to use the what against the mine owners? Federal troops. And is that the first time a president threatened to use troops against mine owners? Yes, it is. Normally we use troops against who? Workers. And railroad workers, anyway. And so that's pretty significant. In any case, though, here he is saying the mine strike may not destroy America. We should prevent that from happening. So here he is killing the coal strike. Awesome. Then consumer protection. What inspires us to start looking into consumer protection? The jungle. And we realize, wow, food is gross. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like eating sausages with rat dung and people's spit and poison bread and whatever else. So we passed the Pure Food and Drug Act, which requires us to do what? Properly label all of our food and drugs. So if it says, hey, this medicine is made out of cardboard, you should know that. Or expiration dates, like medicine not effective after tomorrow. You should know that. Meat Inspection Act. What did this do? It required us to inspect meat and factories to make sure they weren't, pooping in the meat. Important. The Roosevelt panic, though, will be caused by over-speculation, but mostly caused by what? Or many people will say it's caused by what? Trust busting. So they say, TR, it's your fault. You destroyed the Constitution. You were busting too much. And so luckily, JP Morgan saves us. Thanks, JP Morgan. So here's TR believing that some trusts are good. And in this case, are we now going to be in the pocket of JP Morgan? Sure. Anyway, Taft becomes the next president of the United States because he's hand-selected by Teddy Roosevelt. As you guys can see here. So the first thing he does is he passes the Mann-Elkins Act. And what does the Mann-Elkins Act do? Right, it expands the ICC's power to include who? Telephone, telegraph, all those other interstate businesses. He also creates the Postal Savings Bank, and what is this supposed to do? Help rural farmers with banks and post offices and whatever else. Payne-Aldrich tariff, what is this going to do? Lower the tariff, that's a plus. We like that. And then he busts a trust, and who's going to be happy about this? TR, because all of a sudden he starts busting all trust, right? Does he believe in good or bad trusts? He says all trusts are bad, and in fact he busts U.S. Steel, which is owned by who? And why does TR feel like we should not be busting JP Morgan? Because he saved us. He says, Taft, you're doing it wrong. There are trusts that should succeed. And he said, no, I don't believe in that shenanigans. And so the other thing that happens is the Ballinger Pinchot controversy, where he fires Pinchot over the forest. You guys remember this? It's all about nature and the environment. Just know, you don't have to know the details, but Taft fires Pinchot, and this breaks up the friendship between TR and Taft. It breaks up their bromance, that is correct.
So like Pinchot was fired?
Pinchot was fired even though Ballinger was the one that was doing the wrong stuff, because Ballinger was Taft's friend.
So who was Pinchot?
Pinchot was the U.S. Forest Service chief that was appointed by TR. And so when Pinchot was fired, TR thought that it was a personal attack on him, and so him and Taft stopped being friends.
I'm friend you on Facebook.
As a result, in the election of 1912, you have this awesome election. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt runs with the Progressive Party, also known as the Bull Moose Party. And he tries to run a third term, but they said, wait a minute, you can't do that because you already ran 2 terms. And people called him a tyrant. But nonetheless, he ran on a policy of new nationalism. Primarily, he believed that we should what? Regulate good trusts, more government regulation, social welfare, child labor laws, better working conditions. Wilson was like, nah, forget that noise. Let's bust all trusts. That's what he believed. And by busting all trusts, it's going to help who? Farmers and small businesses. He says no government regulation. That's not necessary. Laissez-faire. That's what we need. And we'll bust them later when I win. Because the Republican Party is split, who's naturally going to win here? The Democratic Party and Wilson. Here comes the tide. Wilson wins, becoming the third progressive president. And will he start busting trusts? Yeah. Yes, and will he also regulate others? So he's pretty pragmatic there. He will keep some, bust others. He will pass the Underwood tariff, which is a very low tariff. He'll also introduce the federal income tax 16th Amendment because we need money to be able to pay for what? Social welfare programs. Federal Reserve Act will create the Federal Reserve System, the banking system that we have, to try to avoid what? Depressions, recessions, that kind of thing. Federal Trade Commission will continue to investigate corruption in trusts. The Clayton Antitrust Act will also be used to continue busting trusts, but it will explicitly not be allowed to be used against what? Labor unions. Adamson Act tried to reduce to 8-hour workdays. Adkins v. Children's Hospital, what did this do? Established minimum wages for women. Yes, but it was ruled unconstitutional eventually. Federal Farm Loan Act, don't worry about that one. And that's the Progressive Era and Unit 7. Are there any questions about that section so far? None? We're going to take a 5-minute break, guys, and we'll come back and finish off Unit 8. So, the next thing we're going to cover then is Unit 8. Unit 8 will begin with World War I, and then we'll move on to the Roaring Twenties. Yes, so Great Depression we'll cover next week. So, everyone ready? Here we go. World War I. So the main causes of World War I you guys should already know. Militarism, alliances, more importantly, secret alliances, right? Imperialism, and of course, nationalism. Okay? Of course, you have the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by the Black Hand and this gentleman, Gavrilo Princip. But that's okay, that won't be on your test. Europe's divided for war. And again, all these nations go to war, and yet is America going to start off from the very beginning? Instead, and this war will be very expensive because of, it's industrialized. We'll introduce new weapons like artillery, planes, submarines, tanks, trench warfare. By the way, they just discovered a new trench that had been completely buried, and they discovered it like 3 weeks ago. Like, it's a German trench, and it's completely intact. It's pretty cool. No man's land, you guys should know. Trench, gas mask, trench foot, air balloons, flamethrowers, grenade launchers, poison gas, machine guns. Machine guns, by the way, the worst one, right? Yeah. Hands down, the worst one. Again, in terms of armies, that's who participated. Good stuff. So why did America not initially participate? America, when this war first broke out, declared what? Neutrality. We were busy building the Panama Canal. Wilson was elected. We're like, nah, I don't want to deal with that. Besides, was it our war? No. That was their war. Yeah.
It was in 1912 when it started?
No, I mean, exactly started? All the problems began, but the war actually begins in 1914. Okay. In any case, all this stuff is happening, and the U.S. is like, I don't really want to go to war. Look, can we trade with both countries? Is this an opportunity for us? Yeah, let's trade with both of them. We don't have to just declare war on one or the other. And they should respect our neutrality. Now, we want freedom of the seas. If we're not going to war, we shouldn't be attacked. We should not be attacked by either allies or by Central Powers. We want to be equal. Well, the British began blockading, as we all know, and was it effective? Sure, and of course, we lost trade with the Central Powers, and yet Allied trade expanded exponentially. I mean, look at the graph. It's a pretty big difference. Their trade zeroed out, and our trade with England increased dramatically. In any case, the German U-boats began attacking, and the first boat that they sank was the... No! Lusitania! And we're like, hey, you killed some Americans. That is not okay. You need to knock that off. And did we want to go to war right away? We didn't. We're like, hey, so we said Germany, don't do it again. And what did Germany say? We promised never to sink American ships again. And then they did it again. And they're like, Germany, stop doing that. And Germany said, okay, fine, we promise not to do it again. And they made the Arabic pledge. And I will warn them the next time. But then they did it again. And they said, fine, we promise we will not sink any more American ships. Because does Germany want America to go to war? No. Absolutely not. We want to avoid that as best as possible. So Germany limits its unrestricted submarine warfare. And then the Zimmerman note shows up. And a Zimmerman note is a letter that says what? Who can raise their hand and tell me what the Zimmerman note said? Brenda.
It's a secret letter to Mexico to attack the U.S. industry from the Mexican side.
Yeah, it was a secret letter saying, hey, Mexico, if you declare war against America, we will join you and we will help you get back the Mexican cession. And so here's all that evilness. And we're like, shenanigans! How dare you? But does that make us declare war yet? No. Ultimately what makes us declare war is Germany attacking us again. Now, by this time, Germany goes ahead and attacks us because they're about to win the war anyway, right? Yeah. There's no fear here. So Wilson declares war. We're angry, we're upset, we want to declare war. Why are we fighting, by the way? You should know the list of reasons why we're going to war. The right is more precious than peace, the war to end all wars, defend human rights, the world must be made safe for democracy. Just know the reasons why we went to war, guys. This, by the way, is one of the questions in your chart, I think. CODS is a World War I. It'll be one of the questions on the chart, I think. I think it is. I think so. Yeah, it is. It's the last one. You guys see that? It's on the last page there. So these are just some of the things you guys should know. I mean, copy it from your notes, but that's going to be where that is. Shh. And of course, Germany says, bring it on. We've already won the war. You can't do anything about it. And so America says, fine, to war then. So, the Committee on Public Information, what do they do focus on? Propaganda. Propaganda, propaganda. Songs like Over There. Over There. 4 Minutemen speeches, right? More propaganda. Beat the Hun campaign. And, movies. Again, are they using fear? Yes, they are. And then, of course, we got to mobilize the country for war now that we have propaganda. War Industries Board, led by Bernard Baruch. He's pretty cool. He will do things like help us make sure that the country is ready for war. Good there. He will convert the consumer economy into a war economy. We'll make bullets, tanks, planes. We'll recognize that the soldier is as important as the factory worker. Then we'll have the Food Administration, and we'll promote things like rationing of food, or at least encourage rationing of food. Is it mandatory? No. Something to remember, folks. Rationing is voluntary, not mandatory. That's not the same in World War II. Voluntary rationing. These were suggestions. Remember, meatless Mondays and, wheatless Wednesdays and porkless Saturdays. All those things. Eat more cottage cheese. You'll need less meat. Wheatless kitchen. Don't waste bread. Don't waste bread. The kitchen is the victory. We eat because we work. So we started growing what? Victory gardens. Because for every tomato that you grow, that's one tomato that can go fight on the front lines for your soldiers in their stomachs. Again, sowing the seeds of victory, victory gardens. And again, eat more fish. They feed themselves. Easy to grow. Eat rabbits. They multiply a lot. But guys, rabbits have lots of kids, and they're easy to grow. A cow takes forever, so go eat rabbit. And rabbit's actually not that bad. Rabbit's actually pretty good. Again, victory garden, and then food, some more, and food, 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 and more food, and food, more food, food. But the cartoons are cool, which is why I just have a bunch of them. They're neat. Then, fuel administration. So what are we going to conserve here? Coal especially. We're going to close down non-essential factories. So what kinds of gimmicks will we come up with here? Daylight savings. Gasless Sundays. Heatless Mondays. Lightless Tuesdays. Here we go. And then, of course, we got to pay for the war. So the U.S. Treasury Department is going to make sure that we sell what? Liberty bonds. But what else are we going to increase? Taxes. So Liberty bonds and Liberty bonds and Liberty bonds and Liberty bonds. Liberty bonds. More Liberty bonds. And are you buying your Liberty bonds? Then you have recruitment and enlistment. We got to get people to join the war. Now, we had a lot of volunteers, but did we still need more people? Yeah. So we had the draft, and the draft was Selective Service Act of 1917 that eventually started the draft from 21 to 30, but eventually increased it to what? 21 to 40. Clearly, we needed more soldiers. Ultimately, we got a lot of people joining up here. 400,000 black Americans, 11,000 women, 15,000 Native Americans. I mean, a lot of people fought in this war. Fighting. By the way, you guys, did we talk about this picture? About how, because these are called mass photographies, in the front of this photo, it's only a few people, but as far as you get further and further back, it has to be like hundreds of people. Because it's from perspective. So from really, really far away, that crown is going to need like 1,000 people. So here you only have, what, like 15? But by the time you get to that torch is made of thousands of people. Because you're taking it from like a really high tower, and it goes really far back. And the further back you get, the smaller they look, right? So you need more people to fill that in. And so mass photography became really popular in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. I have a lot more photos of this that I just found, so I'm going to plug them into my PowerPoints later. I'll show you guys a few later on. But they're pretty cool. And again, here you have like 15, and by the time you get all the way to the end, you have like 1,000. But you guys understand why this is the case, though, right? Because of perspective. But imagine the coordination necessary there. It's not only your clothing, but all right, everyone don't move. A little more to the left. Anyway, women, will they play a large role in the war? Most definitely. Working in the factories, working for the YWC as communicators, working on the field. Again, working. Grandma's buying Liberty bonds. We're serving as nurses. They're also serving in the League for Women's Services. African Americans, are they going to fight? Most definitely. They will play big roles in this war. Of course, race riots will exist because of the national northern migration. And then immigrants, will they have a chance to show off their Americanness? Yes. Of course they will. We are all Americans. And of course we're going to take away people's rights, naturally. Espionage Act. You may not obstruct or try to, ruin this war for us. Sedition Act. What may you not do? Criticize the war. Schenck v. U.S. What are we limiting? If it is what? Presents a clear and present danger. You guys should know Schenck. On the war front, you had that happen, and then the war ended. And that's the end of the war. War's over. By the way, what's the end of the war called? What day? Armistice Day. So, Treaty of Peace or Treaty of Revenge. Wilson wanted peace without victory. He promoted his 14 points. You guys should know the 14 points. Yeah. Huh? Oh, yeah, but these are the 7 you should know, the 14 points. You should know these are the 14 points. questions there? Okay. Anyway, he's reelected because he did keep us out of war for a while. Treaty of Versailles. Again, the Treaty of Versailles, you guys know war, guilt, and all that stuff, right? No details. You guys need to go in there. It does create a League of Nations. It requires everyone to fight back. Collective security. Ensured peace and security. Here's the League of Nations. Unfortunately, the League of Nations will fail because Wilson didn't really get anything that he wanted. And then, who's going to kill the League of Nations? Henry Cabot Lodge doesn't want it. And what's his argument for not wanting the League of Nations, guys? Yeah, it's going to force us to go to war, take away our sovereignty, take away our war declaration powers. It'll violate the Monroe Doctrine. Remember what Washington said about entangling alliances. So any questions about Lodge's opposition to the League of Nations? Are you sure? Lodge offered partial membership, and is that better than nothing?
Yes.
So then who ultimately killed the League of Nations? Wilson, because Wilson was what? All or nothing. He was stubborn. He refused to compromise, so ultimately he was too idealistic. And the League of Nations will exist without America, and is that going to be very stable?
No.
And so why did it fail? Wilson's stubbornness, significant to World War I. And again, to what extent did the U.S. achieve the objectives that led it into the war? That's one of your charts in the book, in the packet. Good with World War I? Lastly, folks, the 20s that roar. I would argue that Unit 7 and 8 are pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
Unit 5 and 6, you guys didn't study for, but they are the hard ones. And so the one you guys didn't study for is the hard unit that you guys probably should have studied for, because that's the one that people tend to do poorest on. Now you won't know how you would have done had you studied for it. Oh well. Anyway, Roaring 20s then. A lot of things happening in the Roaring 20s. And we have to ask ourselves, were the Roaring 20s an era of good times or bad times? The answer is, of course, both. Very good. Well done. You've been taught well. So here are some of the bad times. Of course, folks, there's going to be a lot of strikes because the progressive era is over. So because the progressive era is over, we're going to have to determine if the progressive era was successful or not. And in some cases, was the progressive era successful? Think about labor conditions. Did the progressive era succeed in that respect? No. Not really. What about, laissez-faire government? Did they succeed in that respect? Not so much. So, remember the successes of the labor reforms here? All the good things that happened? Yeah, most of these were destroyed and taken over, so not so good. You should know the Boston police strike. And who was the governor in charge at the time? Calvin Coolidge. I said, we're going to fire all of you because police officers may not go on strike if they what? Pose a danger to the society. So who else may not go on strike? Firefighters, nurses, doctors. Great Steel Strike, also a strike. Not so good. Then you have the beginning of the right to work movement or the open shop movement, which tried to ban what? Right, it tried to ban closed shops, right? Prevent workers from having to join a union. You see the return of yellow dog contracts, which is not so bueno. And then you have the rise of communism and immigrants, fear of immigrants. So there's a fear that these immigrants might be bringing a new threat to America, and that threat was what? Communism, anarchy, all those things. And so to make sure that they were not doing that, you had the beginning of the Palmer Raids. And what the Palmer Raids were is when we sought out anarchists and communists and we deported them. Make sense? The Palmer raids deported them. Here they are, picking them up, finding them, and deporting them. How is that different from the Immigration Acts? Did the Immigration Acts deport them?
No.
It just prevented them from what? Coming to America. So remember that, guys. That's always something that people get wrong. You guys should also know that this anti-foreign sentiment occurred with Sacco and Vanzetti. Who were these two guys? Italian, atheist, anarchist, communist immigrants. They're draft dodgers as well. And is any of that a crime, really?
No.
Just unpopular, but they were arrested for murder. Did they do it?
No.
Was it pretty clear that they didn't do it?
Yeah.
And were they killed anyway?
Yeah.
Not so good, guys. So you should know that this is a really good example of how people were racist and fearful of immigrants. So you have the rise of nativism again, brought on by the KKK. Here's a KKK wedding. Brought on by the rise of KKK films like Birth of a Nation. Ultimately, the KKK falls when David Stevenson is arrested for tax fraud. But again, we want to root out the undesirables. So it'll be the federal government's job to fix this problem. Okay, so it'll be the federal government's job to fix this problem. So we're going to kick out these people. We'll establish things like literacy tests, and we'll establish Ellis Island. Ellis Island will be used to root out immigrants. Again, if you guys come to the East Coast trip next year, you'll be able to see Ellis Island. Just like that. You'll be able to visit there, actually. Angel Island, on the other hand, folks, shh, quiet. Angel Island, of course, dealt with the Chinese and Paper Sons. Who were Paper Sons? Yeah, they just forged documents to pretend that they were sons so they could come to the U.S. And then you pass the Immigration Acts, which tries to prevent immigration to America, right? Any questions there? You have the Immigration Act of 1921 and the National Origins Act of 1924. Any questions about that? 3% to 2%. The Immigration Act of 1921 was 3% of the 1890 census. The National Origins Act was 2% of the 1890 census. Yeah.
Will it ever, like on the AP test, give us the years, or we just have to know?
They won't ask you which one's which. You should just, you can if you're writing on the essay, you should be able to at least note the Immigration Act of 1921 and 1924, or just know National Origins Act and the Emergency Quota Act. If you know those without the year, you'll be fine. On the AP test, they won't give you the year unless they say in the 1920s what acts were passed. Then you should know. So you should know the year in that respect. They might ask you in this time period, but they won't ask you, the Emergency Act was passed in what year? That won't happen. Again, the idea was America must be kept America. So what happened to immigration as a result? It declined dramatically. Scope's monkey trial. This is intolerant because it said, what could you no longer do? Teach evolution. And we did it anyway. John Scopes taught evolution. He went to trial defended by Clarence Darrow of the ACLU. And it was ridiculous because it made fun of who, ultimately? Not the South, but a specific group. Not Christians. Christian fundamentalists. The diehards, the people that believed in the Bible word for word. Because it said you believe in every single thing in the Bible, not as a metaphor, but literally word for word. And so it criticized Christian fundamentalists. And again, evolution, speak not, hear not, see not, that kind of stuff. The path to education was not good. Do not eat from the tree of knowledge was pretty much the basic idea. This cartoon comes up a lot, guys, so you should be familiar with this one. Again, the rise and fall of man. The idea is mankind did very well from primate to Neanderthal, and Socrates were like the pinnacle of mankind, and we fell off the map right after William Jennings Bryan. So, yeah. William Jennings Bryan was the prosecutor in the Scopes monkey trial. Yes.
Can this be on the list?
Yeah. It could also, yeah, you guys could get a DBQ on the... Guys, I highly believe that the DBQ will probably be on either Jackson, the Mexican-American War, or the Progressive Era. That's where I would put my money on. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's my guess. Prohibition, obviously, you guys know. Anti-Saloon League, Volstead Act, got rid of alcohol, all that stuff. Gangsterism, Al Capone, rise of speakeasies. You guys know speakeasies, simple stuff, right? Secret bars. Yeah.
So on the John Scopes, like, things, what did they rule, like?
Oh, they found him guilty because the court was very conservative, but public opinion found Christian fundamentalists guilty. Does that make sense? Speakeasies. The Noble Experiment, guys, in case you guys are curious, this might come up. The Noble Experiment was primarily just this prohibition. They tried to see what would happen if we ban alcohol, and did it work? No, because crime rates just went right up. Instead of drinking alcohol legally, people just drank alcohol illegally. That's what changed. Did some people stop drinking? Sure. But the people that were still going to drink, were still going to drink. So everyone good on the bad. Yes, ma'am.
No, I was gonna say, did that make the economy rise because the alcohol was being expensive? It was like bootlegging.
No, but that money didn't go anywhere. That money went to a few people, and it wasn't taxed. So it was not good. Anyway, let's talk about the good. The mass consumption economy. People are buying lots of nice things now. Prosperity is a rise. Lots of cool things like toasters and ice machines. The problem is, will consumer debt go up? That's not so good. So be aware of that. Anyway, Henry Ford introduces the assembly line. He'll combine that with interchangeable parts and scientific management and Frederick Taylor. You guys know him? What did he do? The whole point was to do what? He wants to make the factory efficient. So again, guys, remember, Frederick Taylor wants to make the factory efficient. That's Frederick Taylor and Taylorism, or scientific management. Make the factory efficient. So we make all these cars. It's good. We make a lot of them. And the impact of the automobile. Eventually, it will replace the steel industry. It'll employ a lot of workers. Will it lead to other industries? Most definitely. Steel, rubber, petroleum, gas stations, motels, hotels, holiday inns. Construction of highways is also a big deal. And because of cars, we have more leisure time. We can move out more. All that good stuff. Advertising. Is advertising critical during this time period? Most definitely, folks, because advertising will encourage consumerism, won't it? It'll also encourage, again, women as sex symbols. It'll alter the image of beauty of what is sexy for women. And is it going to start gearing towards women now? They're going to see women not as just these housewives, but women as consumers, as the main buyers. It's going to focus on sexuality, of smoking and drinking is okay for women, because if smoking and drinking is okay, then what will women go out and buy? Alcohol and cigarettes. Also made weird toys for kids. It'll also encourage what, folks? Purchasing on credit. That's not good. And again, of course, we will use advertisements, billboards to say, hey, cigarettes are good. We'll use false advertising and just blatantly lie. We'll use sexuality to sell. We'll use the cult of celebrity to sell things, won't we? The idea is, hey, if Jackie Robinson is smoking cigarettes, maybe I should smoke cigarettes too. Here's Babe Ruth saying, I smoke a lot when I play baseball. Or I smoke when I swim. Because that makes sense. In order to digest. So, is advertising really critical here? Most definitely. And then, of course, entertainment, radio, KDKA, always a question that comes up, KDKA. National radio stations, NBC and CBS, start spreading across the country. First feature-length film is, unfortunately, a very racist film, Birth of a Nations. First hockey is Al Jolson as Joel Singer, and unfortunately, it's also pretty racist. Yay, America. It's okay, this time it's just blackface. So it's just in poor taste. It's not a movie about racism. They just didn't realize that was bad. In any case, the significance of entertainment is that it will promote more leisure time. It'll promote this idea of a changing role of women, right? That'll change the role of women. It'll promote the cult of celebrity, right? If in that movie, Al Jolson smoking a cigarette, white people might smoke cigarettes, and black people will be like, wow, that's racist, because Al Jolson is in blackface. Yes?
So what is like the cult of celebrity?
The cult of celebrity was the idea that people would be so enamored with, like, think Justin Bieber. The young girls love Justin Bieber, and they just want to do everything Justin Bieber related. Because if Justin Bieber, drinks Coca-Cola, I'm going to drink Coca-Cola. Or just think like, a lot of sports fans love Kobe Bryant. And so if Kobe Bryant wears, Kobe shoes, we're going to wear Kobe shoes. If Kobe Bryant wears Giorgio Armani, we're going to wear Giorgio Armani. So we're so enamored by these celebrities that there becomes a cult following around them. And so we're going to use, and we do today. And we're going to use that. I mean, guys, we almost fall to the beck and whim of Twitter. What did Brad Pitt say about the next movie? He didn't like it. Well, I'm not going to watch it. Brad Pitt's not going to watch it. That kind of thing. The other big thing about entertainment, guys, is it promoted national conformity. That's the big one, right? Everyone's watching the same movies. Everyone's listening to the same music. It creates a cult of celebrity. It creates a culture of consumption. But many people also criticize that entertainment did what? It promoted immorality. Drinking, smoking, sexuality. That's not so good. Airplanes. So these guys flew. And then this guy flew again across the Atlantic. You had passenger airlines, pretty awesome. And then changes in social life, specifically with women. The sexual revolution begins. And the rise of which group? Flappers. So they're dancing and they're free and they're wearing short dresses and bobbed hair and makeup and accessories. Are they changing the definition of beauty? Yes. Might they impact advertising? Yes. Might advertising impact them? Yes, so you have this cycle of change for women. This is what is expected of women now. They should be sexy and alluring and have nice hair and wear jewelry and be attractive. Here are different kinds of flappers and other flappers. Here's women smoking and drinking in public. And then, of course, there's Margaret Sanger that said what? Right, women should have the right to divorce and that women should have the right to use birth control. Use birth control because birth should be not by chance. And again, one of my favorite pictures. Be gone, foul demon! I'm not ready yet. Women's political movements suggesting that women should not be in the home, but rather in the political scheme of things. So you have women trying to get women to vote. Of course, the National Women's Party, led by Alice Paul, wants equal rights. Is this going to succeed here?
No.
Is it going to succeed later? Yes. No. Also killed by Phyllis Schlafly. Twice. League of Women Voters is going to try to encourage women to vote because they're not. Then the Harlem Renaissance, something you should also know. It's a revival of black culture, poetry, art, jazz. You guys definitely need to know the Harlem Renaissance. That's like a must. That's always going to be on the test. No, you have Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, Duke Ellington, Jelly Roll Morton, ragtime, blues, jazz, Cotton Club. But it's a club for blacks. Like, they took on the word to be like, no, this is our club now. But they chose to call it that. Langston Hughes, Claude McKay. You guys know Marcus Garvey? Yeah, Back to Africa movement, Black Pride. Then, of course, there's a lost generation of people that are sad about everything. They felt like society abandoned them. H.L. Mencken, F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. By the way, I have never read this book, so if you guys have a copy, I've never read it. So if you guys have a copy that you guys are done reading, I'd be very much happy to borrow a copy of The Great Gatsby, and I'll read it. I don't want 100 copies of this book. I just want someone's copy so I can read it over the weekend. No, I know, I do want to read it, I just never have. I never got around to it, so. Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms, about how war is terrible. Sinclair Babbitt, about how society is terrible to children. Guys, almost done here? Politics of the Roaring Twenties. Of course, Warren G. Harding is elected to return us to normalcy. Normalcy to him means no progressive era and laissez-faire government, right? No progressive reforms, only laissez-faire government. He believes in trickle-down effect. He believes in a Fordney-McCumber tariff, which is a tariff increase. He believes in laissez-faire. And during the Mississippi flood, did he help the farmers? No. No, because corporations need help, but farmers don't need help. That's their fault. God is punishing them. Here's trickle-down effect. As always. The Ohio Gang, his group of friends he appointed to his cabinet that were horribly corrupt. Again, Grantism, Colonel Charles Forbes stole from veterans' hospitals. Nope. Attorney General Harry Daugherty. He's the one who stole from liquor. Oh, he sold liquor permits, right? He sold illegal liquor permits. And the Teapot Dome scandal. This is the bad one. This is the one you guys have to know.
Wait, did he die or he did it for years only?
He'll die. The Teapot Dome scandal is where he sold Navy oil reserves when you're not supposed to do that. And then he dies of apoplexy. And then Calvin Coolidge becomes the next president. He does nothing for them. He doesn't help the farmers.
He was the one that was the Massachusetts government, right?
Yep. He does nothing for the farmers. Foreclosures increase. He's like, whatever. They try to fix farm foreclosures in Congress. He's like, nope, gonna veto that too. So Coolidge is kind of a D-bag when it comes to farmers. Very mean. Harding and Coolidge are pretty tied for that. For like worst presidents, in my opinion. Because, I mean, Grant was bad, but he did some stuff. And like, he did save this, he did fight in the Civil War. Yeah, but these guys, nah, I don't think so. Anyway, foreign policy. Washington Disarmament Conference, what was the goal? To disarm the navies around the world. The Washington Disarmament Conference was to limit naval armaments. The Five-Power Treaty, what was that supposed to do? Also disarm the world, right? Reduce navies. Clark Memo said that we were no longer going to do what? We will not intervene in Latin America. We will void the Roosevelt Corollary. And the Dawes Plan. Dawes Plan said, hey, we will help Germany revive its economy by giving it money, right? Dawes Plan helped Germany revive its economy. Dawes Plan, you guys should know. Any questions about the Dawes Plan? Not to be confused with the Dawes Severalty Act, which is about what? Native American tribal ownership of land. And then the Kellogg-Briand Pact, what did this foolishly do? It said that we would outlaw wars And is that going to work out for us? No, because that's impossible. Who doesn't join this, by the way? Germany. Okay. Please take a quick look at this chart that I passed out earlier today. Double check it if you have any questions before you guys leave today. We'll work on this a little bit in class, but you guys have other charts to work on. So again, take a look at that chart and see if there's anything there that you have any questions about. Oh, thank you.
This one.
Which one is that?
The back, like second to last.
Oh, they're on the podium. The foreign policies one? Okay. So the question is about the foreign policies chart on the back. It's the one that has 5 columns. So pretty much what all this is asking is, in the first column, how did these presidents promote isolationism? Washington's farewell address, Jefferson, what were they doing? They were expansion and isolationism. Under McKinley's foreign policy, he should talk about what happened in Hawaii. He took it over. Causes of the Spanish-American War, jingoism, yellow press, that kind of thing. And these are just elements of the Spanish-American War. Okay? Under big stick dollar diplomacy and moral diplomacy, explain what their foreign policies were there and how they all led to imperialism. Make sense there? Okay. Any other questions about the chart at all? Explanation needed? These 2 units are pretty easy, right? Yeah, so long as you guys can cover these, you should be fine. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay then, folks. I will see you guys on Tuesday and Wednesday. And remember, you have essays later this week. Oh, and if your parents are coming to a parent meeting tomorrow night at 6:30 here, how many of you guys think you might be coming to that meeting with your parents, to the East Coast trip meeting? Cool. Cool. Yeah, bring your families. Yes.